Hello and good morning. Welcome to office. Well, today is not office hours. Today is a webinar on persona and journey mapping. I hope you're all excited because this is an important webinar for a couple of reasons, and we will give people about 2 minutes to join, and then we are going to start. I hope you all had a good New Year and are ready to get back to business. Hello, hi Ricardo. Hi Khalil, Happy New Year to you too. And hello Kishore. Okay, so I think it's time to start. And as I was saying, today's webinar is important for a few reasons. Um, One of the main reasons this is important is because today you will learn a few tools to communicate what you've learned here to people outside. And so you will realize this maybe in a couple of months, once you're out of this course, that communicating with people in this course was a lot easier than communicating the same ideas to people outside. And that's because you've all gone through the same process and you understand the importance of these steps and of going through the process. And sometimes you might meet people outside who do not realize the importance of this. And and in that case, how do you communicate what you've learned? And so it needs to be condensed in a format that is easily comprehensible, even by people outside. And and that takes some practice and that takes some skill. So today we're going to learn a couple of those tools, and hopefully they will be helpful to you not just during this course but also afterwards. Okay, does anyone have any questions before we begin? Okay, okay, great. So um I know, so right now we're kind of in the middle of these. um I know we've just finished assignment 2 and we've gone to module number 3, and this particular uh, tool I think will of course fits in right now, but you will also learn something similar in module 4, where we will be uh, designing a service map. And so I just want you to make sure that these things might sound a little similar, um, but a customer, they are different. And I think you will realize the difference once you get to the service map. And the service map is for clearly for services, while a journey map can be used for any kind of customer experience. Okay, great. So today's agenda is going to begin with talking about personas. What are personas? Why do we make them? How did they come about? And how would you go about making a persona? The second part would be what is a customer journey map? How do we make one? Why is it important? And and we'll see and we'll try our hand on a journey map right here live in the session. Okay. And as always, we have time for your Q&As. And if you have questions during the session, please do share them either here in the chat window or in the Q&A box. Great. Okay, I'm sorry, this little squiggle in the bottom is not going away. Okay, great. So what is a persona? A persona is a way to model, summarize, and communicate research about each stakeholder. And so before I go to persona, does everyone here know what is a stakeholder or who is a stakeholder? And why do we need the term stakeholder as opposed to just users or customers? Any guesses? Why do we need to use the word stakeholder as opposed to just using the word user? Right. But can you give me an example um, in which your user is not the only important uh, group that you need to cater to? Okay, well, um, so my main point here is that the user is not always your customer, right? The person who's going to be using your product is not always the person who is also buying it. Right. Yeah, mall customers versus mall owners. Right. So that's an example where you have, if you're designing something for a mall, you would need to consider these two distinct stakeholder groups. Exactly. Right. Can you also think of examples in which the user is not the customer, is not actually the person buying your product? So can you think of any examples in which the user, the person who is using your products is not the one buying your product? So for example, baby products. A baby is not the one buying, right, exactly. Right. So the baby is not buying the products. The parents are buying it. Same for yes, same for children, owner and dog. Exactly. Right. So that's why we also need to consider stakeholders. And so often if you're building something that needs to be assembled, your stakeholder might also be somebody who's assembling it. Your stakeholders might also be the retailers. So, right, Christopher has a great definition for it. Exactly, Christopher, that's really well done. So Christopher says a stakeholder is the entire value chain that may have a direct or indirect influence on the product slash services, besides users, regulators, suppliers. Christopher, that's really well done. That's way better than I could have put it. Um, thank you. So a persona is a way to summarize all the information that you've gathered about each stakeholder. And we will learn more about these in just a moment. Any questions as of now? Okay, so this concept was developed by a software developer called Alan Cooper, and he wrote a book about it. And the book has a very interesting name. It's called "The Inmates Are Running the Asylum," and it's about I think the book talks about why high-tech products are difficult to use and why are they um, built that way and how can we improve that. Yes, Khalil, that is the name of the book. Inmates Are Running the Asylum. So in case you guys want to pick that up, please do reach out to me. I can send you details. It's a very interesting book, and that's where the concept of persona was generated. And so Alan Cooper realized that he needed a way to um, personify the people that he was building for, and it was hard for him to um, imagine a stakeholder group. So he invented this method of condensing all of this information into one model. So let's look at uh, what what does um, and what are the rules of making a persona. So has anyone here used a persona before or seen one? Okay, that's fine. So we're all going to learn something today. Great. Um, so there are a couple of simple rules for making a persona. This is not a specific person that you are, and I'm going to show you a persona in just a second, but I just want to go through these rules and establish uh, this baseline before we go ahead. So this is a persona is depicted as a specific person, but is not a real individual. So you would not just find one person and make the persona all about them. That is not the point of a persona. And a persona represents a group. Uh, an entire group is represented as one person. So in this case, you would also uh, need to make sure that you are not stereotyping. So if you're not considering the things that you already know about this group and just or you think you know about this group and condensing that into a persona. Uh, all the information in the persona comes from the observations and interviews that your team collects. You may you may use the internet in some cases to maybe verify something or or um, or if you have if it's or use maybe some information about demographics, but largely all the information in this persona should be coming from your interviews. Great. So this is what a typical persona looks like. And these change according to the project, according to the companies that are making it, and your team may decide to make a completely different format. So they tend to have a few things in common. Excuse me. Like I said, they have a name. Um, there is usually some information about the person. There's usually a picture, some quotes, and um, you could add information such as motivations, goals, frustrations, and there is usually a short bio that goes with a persona to tell you who is this person. And this is common among most personas. So this particular persona also has a personality, um, and this is not necessary. And I don't know, have you guys heard of the MBTI test? It's it was a test developed many years ago, which lets you categorize personality based on 4 traits. Um, and it could be useful if you use that in your work generally. So this might give people a way to understand your stakeholder group. Right. So, but the important part here is to understand that Clark Andrews is not a real person, or this persona is not of one customer or one user called Clark Andrews. No, this is about an entire stakeholder group that is uh, condensed into this persona. So this could be um, tech focused, younger males who want to get healthier. So if that is your stakeholder group, in this case, you could, for example, create a persona such as this to condense that information. Great. So why would we make a persona? Why, instead of just talking about a stakeholder group and saying that we have these people, we have these tech-focused male, younger male, and um, and we want to make a product for them. Well, a persona helps you build empathy. And I have a few questions coming up. So try to think about how these things are reflected in a persona. So it helps you develop focus because um, because often you might forget who you are building for, and that might lead you astray. But if you have a persona in mind, you will you will remember how to make decisions. Of course, as I said before, this is important to communicate because it's a good way to condense information. It's also a great way to defend your decisions. And this will come up when you're working between teams. So your team might be aligned um, behind the stakeholder group and know exactly what is needed. But other teams might not understand the stakeholder group, and this will help you communicate uh, communicate information about that group very quickly. And the final one is to measure effectiveness. And personally, I don't think this is the only way to measure effectiveness. This is one of the ways, and I think the primary way to measure effectiveness is by building a prototype. And and building a prototype and taking it to your user and observing them interact with your prototype. I think um, that is the way to measure effectiveness. So Khalil had a question: who is the persona in the photo? I think Khalil, that's just a cartoon. I'm not entirely sure who is the persona. Great. Okay, so pay attention to the first reason for building empathy, first reason for making a persona, which is building empathy. So this is another example of a persona. Can you can you tell me what you think are the aspects that help build empathy in a persona? Right. So what are the elements in this in a persona that are that convey or that help build empathy? Of course, there are multiple elements in this. Right, so I'm not talking about the specific information here. I am talking about the elements, such as there is an element which has brands. There is an element on motivations. There's an element about some demographic information. So which of these help build empathy? um, no. So empathy um, would be understanding who she is and what she um, what she feels. Okay, think about uh, try not to think about the details the in the persona, and we are looking at um, elements of a persona or this different parts that make up a persona. Anyone else? Okay, I will get back to your questions in just a moment, but this is an important part to understand. So what elements of the persona do you think um, help build empathy? Right, right. One is frustrations, goals, and motivations, right? But that's still a level deeper, right? So the main elements that would help you, I mean, so uh, before you can go to frustrations, goals, and motivations, um, you have to start thinking of this persona as a real person. Remember, this is not a real person. Jill Anderson does not exist. None of these things are true about one person. So you have to try and remember that. And so this is just a model of a human being. This is not a real person. So you have to portray this information in a way that makes you think of um, Jill as a real person. So what are the parts of this persona that make you feel that way? Okay, I'll help you out a little bit here. So one of them is definitely a name. Yes, exactly. Ricardo, thank you. A name, right. I mean, you don't actually need a name. You could just say A or B or just write a number, right? But we chose to give a name to this persona. Okay, another one. Any other aspects of this persona that make you feel like this is a real person? A photograph, exactly. Right, right. Why would we need a photo, right? Because this is not a real person, but we still chose a representative photograph. Okay, one more. Well, another one that is right, the quote, because this quote is real. So this is a quote that they would have discovered in through their interviews, and they decided to um, use a real quote to represent this model, right? So I think the three main elements that help you uh, think of this model as a real person are the name, a quote, and the photograph. So the important part to remember here is that this is not a real person, and it is this is information which is represented in the form of a real person, right? Because so now you feel like you know something about Jill, right? You know that she's an extrovert. You know that she's a planner, and um, she's very organized, and so you're starting to build a general picture of someone uh, who is who's in her position and wants to um, someone who needs to travel and someone who likes to stay organized. So you can kind of start picturing what sort of things you would like. But it is also important to remember to not to stereotype in this case, and not to use um, information that you have assumed is true. So the other important rule for making a persona is all of this information is only coming from your interviews and from your observations. Okay, any questions? I know Christopher had a question above. I'm gonna go to that now. Um, Christopher had a question. When will we need to consider persona vis-a-vis the customer experience cycle, or is it two separate things? These are two separate things, Christopher, and and we are going to talk about uh, the journey map, the customer journey map, right now, and I think that will help you understand where to use each of these, and they are interrelated, but they are different things, right? So the next step would be, how would you go about making a persona? So of course you would begin by collecting data. You would, and so you've all done that. You've all done that through your interviews. You could always go out and do more. And I may have spoken about this before, and this is from research at MIT. I think it's called the Griffin study. And if any of you are interested, I could um, share that study with you. But the study says that uh, if this is information about users, I'm sorry, I'm using my touchpad to write today, but this is 100%, and this is number of respondents. So the study says that if you are doing interviews, the quality of information, new information that you're getting starts to drop off once you've done about 8 interviews. So 8 is the magic number here. And I know this sounds arbitrary, but this was this is a pretty famous study in design research, and and they arrived at this number. So once you've done about 8 interviews for one stakeholder group, um, your uh, the amount of new information, amount of high quality new information you get starts to drop off very sharply. So once you've done that, you need to uh, choose the aspects that are relevant. So, for example, are goals and priorities in life important for your stakeholder group or for your product? Are weaknesses and strengths important for your product? Um, and so look at the final point here. Political outlook. Is that do you think that would be relevant for when you're designing something? Could that be a relevant factor? Right. So when would the political outlook be relevant? So should you be including this in your persona? Right. Well, so I think the answer to this, as to many things, is it depends. Right? A political outlook might be important when you're designing policies or when you're designing things which are related to politics. But if it's not related to politics, um, then if you're designing diapers, I don't think a political outlook would be very important. Um, so you also need to decide, and this is a team decision. Your team needs to decide what are the aspects that are relevant, and then try to limit your persona to only relevant information, because uh, this is a model of your stakeholder group, and it is condensing a lot of information. And once you have a persona, you're going to start relying on it uh, very heavily. So you want to make sure that you do not have um, excess information or uh, irrelevant information in your persona. Okay, so before we move forward, I want to go through a few more examples and and make sure we have this down. Okay, so, and especially when we're talking about stakeholder groups, Airbnb is a great example, because you have different stakeholders. You have guests, you have hosts, then you have guests, and even in guests, you might have different kinds of guests. You could have business guests, you could have leisure travelers, and all of these would have different personas. So, so we can see the same elements here as in the other examples. There is a photograph, there is a name, and there are quotes. And there are, and so they decided to go with a, a slightly more condensed version where you're looking at goals, behavior, and concerns. So this is important. Only include information that is relevant to your stakeholder group and to your product. Excuse me. Okay, so we're going to look at two other examples and then we'll take a 1 minute or 2 minute break so that I can rest my voice for a minute and you can digest all of this. I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you right now, and this is something that uh, will only start to make sense or will start to make more sense once you give it a shot as well. Great. So similarly, um, this is a business guest, and and so you would have different motivations. So the business guest is motivated by convenience and comfort, and this would be different from, say, a, a traveler. And so motivations for someone who's traveling, or traveler in the sense of someone who's traveling to see new places as opposed to only for business. So they might have similar behaviors, but the motivations would be different. So, for example, a traveler is more motivated by exploring the local area. So they might uh, settle for a less comfortable place it's in if it gives them access to the local, gives them better access to the local area. They're also more um, motivated by affordable accommodation, whereas the business traveler here was more motivated by convenience and comfort. Great. So, any questions about personas? Um, and I know this is a lot of information in one webinar. But the good part about this is that there is no uh, single template or pattern, and you can always invent your own. And this is a tool that only you are going to use. This is internal to the team. In most cases, your customer, your end user is not going to interact with any of these things. So great. Okay, so let's take a 1 minute break. I'm gonna get some water and we'll be right back with a customer journey map. Great. Welcome back. And Khalil said that the number is 8 and not infinity. Yes, that is absolutely right. The graph that I drew earlier, the number was 8, it was not infinity. Okay. So before we move on, I would like to just test what we've learned and not test, maybe just um, it's a quick poll um, about um, personas. Program support, could you please launch poll number one, the one that has three options? Yes. Great. So, so pay attention to the word minimum. Okay. Program support will show us the results once they're in. Okay, great. So I think most of you got it right. Great. So the answer here is one per stakeholder group, right? So eight is the number of interviews you would need to get, um, yeah, most of the information for each stakeholder group. The minimum number you would need is one per stakeholder group. Okay, great. Any questions about that? Okay, I know I might have confused you a little bit by talking about eight interviews. Um, okay, great. So our next topic for today is a customer journey map. And I'm cognizant of the time, and I know we have about 20 minutes left, but um, this is slightly shorter once we've covered personas. So similarly, a customer journey map is also a model, but in this case, you are modeling the the journey of the customer, right? So this is a way to represent what your customer goes through while they're either using your service or they're using your product. And here we are trying to map the customer's perspective on a few different levels. And and we'll see just right now how this can be helpful when you're designing something, right? So I want to go over a couple of examples um, of right. So Khalil had a question. Will different personas have different journey maps? Yes, absolutely. They could have different journey maps, um, but you don't necessarily need to um, create one for every persona. I think that is a really good question. Yes, they would have, um, and it's not necessary that they would have different journey maps, but it's totally possible. I know that's not very clear. It's not a very clear answer, but it will start to make sense in just a moment. And if it doesn't make sense, please ask that question again. Right, it depends. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry the answer is not as satisfying, but that is what it is. Right, it is situational. So why would you make a customer journey map? So um, this is another tool to not just build empathy, but also to model that empathy and represent it in a way that is easily digestible. So and this the customer journey, uh, the customer journey map is from the customer's perspective, right? So it is, you have to put yourself in the customer's shoes and and ask, well, of course this would be based on observations, and you would also could also maybe ask the customer in some cases about how they're feeling, or observe things about their behavior and interpret their feelings or motivations from that. And as we've discussed before in the empathy webinar, that a customer might not, or a user might not lie to you, but they might actually not know what they're feeling at the time. Great. So let's have a look at a typical customer journey map. Right. So this is a journey map for Tina, and in this case, they start with uh, so this is about a class, about a yoga class, and so it starts in awe. It starts. Um, they start in awe of this class is great, and this is so this class starts when she discovers that she wants to go for yoga. Um, oh, actually, this one's about pole dancing. Well, so she discovers that she wants to do that on social media, and then um, there is then she feels anxious or excited, and um, and then she goes to the class, and then she's still anxious, and then she tries it, and then she's a little frustrated, but she is still having fun. So you can see that there is a dip here, but then there is a rise as well. And then once she's done from the class, she leaves very proud that I was able to do that. um, let's look at another example, and then we're going to try our hand at making a customer journey map ourselves. Um, so this is Michael's journey map, and he is trying to find contact information for an agency or elected official. So, so he has questions. He has tax questions because he hires new employees, and he goes to Google to search for them. He doesn't find it. He only finds something with IRS, and anyone who's interacted with the IRS knows exactly how Michael is feeling right now. And this is it, because I was doing this yesterday, and this is exactly how I felt. Um, and then he takes some time, he's ready to try again. Then he finds the number, and he tries that number, and again he had to wait a very long time. um, and then he gives up. Then he tries again, and then he's still frustrated. Great. So let me go over one final example. Actually, no, let's make our own now, because I know we're coming to the end of our session. So so usually a journey map would have three zones, and the first one is the lens, and that is similar to your uh, persona. So here you would have the person who's going through who this journey. Second is the scenario. Then what are the goals and expectations? So this sets the context of this journey map. Um, Number three here are the stages. What are the different stages of this journey? It's the first stage, second stage, um, and this would of course differ based on what you are mapping. And This is information about the stages, about what that person is feeling, and how uh, this feeling here corresponds with, or this level of happiness, or this level of emotion corresponds to what is going on in that stage. And of course, this is just one example of how to make a journey map, and your team may decide on a different template. So I'm going to share these slides with you. Um, Also, if you, there are many different uh, tools available online to help you make journey maps. I know UXpressia is one of them that lets you make a free account, and m- there are many different websites that let you do it. So I think it's up to you to maybe find one that works for you and use that. And so this is, I think, one of the most important part for journey map, and this is where you find the opportunities related to each stage. The center, this is the actual journey, while while these are the opportunities that you discovered um, by mapping this journey, right? Or these are the aspects which you realized that could be improved if you improved at each stage. Great. Okay, so let's try to make our own. I don't know why these drawings don't clear. Hmm. Okay, great. So, um, and I would like your help in making this one. Great. So this is vacation air travel, and so so I would like you guys to maybe tell me. Right. So Christopher says, is it possible that you try to put in some real scenario for us to understand how to use it? Great. So Christopher, I hope vacation air travel is real enough, because uh, imagine at least some of you were on vacation the last week or so. So does this work? Is this a real enough scenario? Great. So um, let's begin with our user who is at home researching and ordering tickets. Okay, great. So how how do you feel when you're at home researching and ordering tickets? And so this would of course, right, comfortable, because you're at home, you're researching tickets, and it's great. You've just had an idea of going on vacation, so you're happy. So everything's great, right? But then you discover that all of these tickets are so expensive, and then it's not very fun, right? But then you still find um, you're still able to find a deal that works for you, and it's not great, but it works, and you manage to find a decent deal, and it's not uh, good enough. It might not be the best deal that you've ever seen, but this time you decide to you relent, and you pick the deal that you found. And you could try to find a better offer, or you could just go with this one at the time. But so so you're not as unhappy as before, but so you're feeling neutral. Then you're in the car driving to the airport. And this is where I don't know if it happens to you guys, but I think I do feel flight anxiety. And that is when you're going to the airport, you're wondering um, whether you've forgotten something, whether you have all your things, and if there's traffic, are you going to miss your flight? Is that so? So this part isn't usually all that great because you're driving to the airport and exactly all do you have everything, and then you go to the check-in card. So then you make it to the airport, and then finally, I think you have like you breathe, you get some time to breathe, and then you're looking at seat options, then you're checking in, and so it's not so you're feeling better than you were when you were driving, but it's still not like the best feeling, I guess. Then you drop your luggage, and that's, I guess, still neutral. It's not the worst experience, but it's not it's also not something that anyone looks forward to. At least I don't know. I've never looked forward to luggage check-in. So if you guys feel differently, please do tell me. And again, so then you've checked in your luggage, and now you're going to the flight. And usually you might, I mean, depending on how you feel at the um, or what kind of flights you have, if you're next to a baby, you might be somewhere down at, um, which might be a little unhappy if you're next to a baby that's in distress. But you might also be, uh, or you might be able to watch some movies or get some sleep, and you have a great flight, and you're now a little comfortable after all of these activities. And then you reach your destination, and now you have to pick up your luggage, which isn't which isn't the best because there's a long wait time. You might have to go through immigration, which is again uh, extremely slow and extremely annoying. And then you reach the luggage area, and there you're waiting again, and um, you're not sure if your luggage has reached there or not, um, right? So right. Khalil had a question. This assumes a certain persona, not someone who is flying. Absolutely, Khalil, that's a great point. This is for a certain persona, and thank you. That was going to be my next point, and I was trying to put myself as the persona here. This is um, this is for a certain persona. So usually when you're making this journey map, you would be um, maybe mapping the journey of one of your users. And of course, the ideal way to do that is to just be a fly in the room when they are doing all of this, and just be a fly on the wall and just be observing and listening while they are going through this whole process. So, which might not be um, possible in this case because this is a short course and you do not have that much time. But a design agency would absolutely visit people, be in their homes while they're going through this process and map this whole journey, right? So exactly, Khalid, this assumes a certain persona. So this journey map may look something like this, right? That how do you um, how do you map the journey of somebody who's on a flight, and this is for a certain kind of persona. So for example here, um, uh, this example lists opportunities as ideation, and here they've identified maybe some opportunities. And here you may notice that they are uh, looking at a check-in app that might make it easier or might reduce stress, and that's just an example. Similarly, you could have another app or service that could also notify customers about delays and luggage status. And I don't know if you guys have tried the new United Airlines app, and I know a lot of you might not be in the US, but if you are, I highly recommend trying out their app. Um, United isn't the best airlines. Khalil says that United breaks guitars. United also breaks people's noses. So it's so guitars are, I guess, like this, not not the worst that has happened. But and I'm not a big fan of United in general, but their app is incredible. And of course, I'm getting nothing from United in any way, but um, they have done an incredible job on their app. And a lot of the things that we have discussed here um, are actually addressed in their app. So Khalil had asked, what is incredible about the app? Um, so all of these things. So the app is updated real time, um, always. So it would, if your gate changes, it would show on your app. Your app would also show you your connecting flights. You can track your luggage on the app. You can also track your flight, in the sense that you can there's a button to go back and see um, where your flight originated. So you can see if I have a flight from Boston to LA, I can go to my app and check where is my flight coming from and what is the status of that incoming flight. And I can keep doing this. I can see, okay, this flight took off from um, I don't know, London, and it's landing in Boston and then going to LA. So I can see where this flight was before London. And you could the flight also tells you in real time the number of passengers that are boarding and how many are left right now. So it has a lot of functionality. So again, this is not anything about United Airline or any comment on what kind of service they have, but only that their app is really well done. And I think I would like to find out who made their app, because they must have hired a company to do it. Right. So they've done a great job at identifying the needs of their users. Great. So this is a video about service design, but I'm not going to play it here, but I will be sharing these slides, and you should have an opportunity to go through it. So one last poll before we leave, and I think we're right on time. Um, Program support, could you please share the next poll? Great. So I'm sorry, there's no question mark there. I think the poll just displays statements with question marks. So the question is, or the statement is, we should try to make the customer happy at every step of the customer journey. True or false? Great. So could you please share the results, program support? So interesting. So I think most of you said it's true. So um, no, actually, you if you try to make your customer happy at every step of the process, you will go bankrupt. And that's an ideal scenario. But in the real world, you would have to do a cost benefit analysis. So, of course, you don't want your customer to be unhappy throughout the journey, because they are going to move, they're going to jump ship and go to another service that gives them slightly more happiness than this journey. So ideally, you would want them, the worst case, you would want them to be neutral. And then once you have all all steps at least neutral, then you can make this slightly better. So Khalil said that you do not want to have a weak link that destroys the perception of the journey. If you can make the customer happy and make money, exactly, Khalil. So you don't want a very bad, you don't want a step um, which is like uh, which is the worst part, or which is which is a memorable bad experience for the customer. And because that's how memory works, so usually you would remember the beginning and the end and the highlights. So if you can focus on those, um, customers will remember the journey as pleasant. Right, exactly, as Khalil said, that it's good to start with steps where there are the most gains. Right. Yes, Christopher, customer journey is about empathizing with the customer. And similarly with personas, they are also a persona is also about empathizing with the customer. Great. So I think we've actually gone over by 4 minutes, but thanks a lot for joining in. I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, please let me know. You can also reach out to me on Canvas if you don't have questions right now. Great. Good night, guys, and thank you all. Sorry, Christopher, I just said exactly what you wrote. Well, it's morning for me, but good night to all of you. Yeah, Khalil, I'll be happy to. That would be great actually. If you could make that would be great practice to make a, a journey map of your learning journey. Okay, bye bye.